Hello friend, I am Rob, the Dungeon Tutor, and today I'm here to help people out with a little issue that kind of comes up from time to time, and that is being able to take a character, and a character being just the basic template of what defines what a character is capable of, what they're carrying, and things like that, so that they can turn that into a living, breathing creature in their world. Now, sometimes you get to build a character, and you have an idea in mind, and you can go through all the steps to either buy all the things that you need as far as point buys or trade-offs to get the kind of character you want. Maybe you can switch a few statistics around or something. In that case, you start off with an idea of the character that you want to play. But you don't always have that opportunity if you've played a lot of different types of games. Sometimes you will end up playing, if you, for instance, go to a convention and play a game with other people. Oftentimes those involve pre-generated characters, meaning you didn't have any hand in it, you are handed a character and that is your role to play in this particular adventure. And some people have never done that and may think that that sounds kind of alien. But I'm here to tell you that there's actually some pretty strong benefits to doing something like that. Number one, mostly I bring this up for conventions because I've attended a few conventions before, and quite honestly, you don't have time in a 4-hour block to create a character and complete a story of any length. So, you need to hit the ground running, as it were. And the way to do that is with a pre-generated character, quite honestly. Give the players a few moments to take stock of the character so they know what the character can and can't do, and there you go. You can start going into the overall description, set up the opening scene for your story. But that's kind of intimidating for some people. I suddenly have a character sheet thrust into my hand. How do I play this character outright? What can I bring to this character that makes that interesting for me? And sometimes you may be handed a character that you have no interest in or have no idea on how to really play. But one of the things, the inherent advantages to pre-generated characters, besides the fact that they're fast, despite the fact that they're something very effective for setting things into motion in your story, because as a game master, you give out the players the characters that you want to use. You can give them all of the bonds and connections in the story and know exactly what their character is coming from because you've made the character. So to a certain extent, you can throw in things like the character Remy's girlfriend. I'm like, well, my character has a girlfriend. Okay. In a horror story, putting those bonds in place can be really useful. So it gives you something that your characters are going to be worried about. If you are in an adventuring group, in a fantasy game, for instance, you can skip the tedious step of how does our party get together. You have that background in place already. So game masters can get quite a bit out of having pre-generated characters in play. And the players don't have to worry about a session zero to all the different things about how am I going to tie my character into the story. It's not necessary. Your character is already embedded into the story, and you are ready to go. So, pre-generated characters can be pretty cool. Now, yeah, there is something special about creating a character from the ground up and adventuring with them. But it's not necessarily a bad thing. And also, sometimes it can be nice to stretch your boundaries a bit. Expand your horizons. Try something you've never tried before. And pre-generated characters can be very useful for that. So, I'm at a game. Maybe we're doing a one-shot. Maybe I'm at a convention. I have a pre-generated character pressed into my hand. What do I do? Well, this is what I do, generally. First of all, I'm going to use this example. This is a pre-generated character for a GUI Cube dungeon, the Red Star Rising campaign. And I'm going to be referring off of this. A lot of times, pre-generated characters aren't going to look this nice. Just being honest here. In this case, I've got illustration right here, so I know what other people are going to see when they see my character. That can be huge. For instance, with this particular fellow, I know that he's going to stand out in a crowd. I know that he's probably not going to be able to just easily mingle here and there with normal folk with their superstitions. The horns are probably going to be a somewhat difficult thing to overcome depending on the world that I'm in. Now, the character is a tiefling. The reddish skin and the horns kind of give that away. He's got kind of the chin whiskers and the pointed goatee thing going on, so he's rocking the look. So, yeah, in worlds where tieflings have a hard time, this could be something that I need to know right away from a first glance perspective. Other people see my character, how are they going to react? I can already start to take that and start shaping that into the personality of the character that I want to portray. Some people see tieflings as only one way to look at things. You're going to have a hard life, people are going to be prejudiced against you, therefore you could be embittered, edgy, dally with, certain darker roads because you feel you've been forced down them, what have you. But that's not always the case. It's just oftentimes many of them have a bit of an edge to their personality because their way hasn't been easy, because they have been treated with suspicion. It's impossible to hide that aspect of their bloodline under most circumstances. So certainly one way of looking at the character's perspective just from appearance. On the other hand, he's not a bad looking guy, quite honestly. He's kind of got that tousled hair look that, some ladies might find attractive, and he's exotic enough that if you get past the fact that his bloodline has some infernal mixings in there, not a bad looking dude. And as long, if you could find compatible personalities and things, he might actually be pretty pleasant to have around. Second thing, I look at the role. What does the story kind of require of my character? What is my job? And I can see that this character is a fighter. He's a tiefling, Fey touch, that's a gooey cube thing. We're not going to get into that at the moment, but he's a tiefling fighter, meaning that he's durable, he's tough. I expect he's probably pretty strong, and the greatsword hilt on his back kind of suggests that, although that's not necessarily indicative of what he himself has. But I know that my character is going to be really good at fighting, and very well may be the best person to stand in front of an onrushing creature and keep everybody else safe if that's my intention. I might also be able to interpret that as might be pretty good shooting bows or something, but probably no magic. So, the next thing is look at the stats. See what the stats tell us. And GUI Cube characters are a bit more robust than your average array in a D&D game, just so you know. So we have a 17 strength. Aha! Yes, he can definitely chop things pretty well. Very, very good strength. 18 dexterity. The only thing he's better than chopping is shooting, apparently. So his higher dexterity is a huge advantage. So he's both very, very strong and very, very nimble. Only a 12 constitution for a fighter? That's not the way a lot of people would lay that out, but it's interesting to know because that also can shape our personality for the character, too. He's not overly healthy, although he doesn't have a disadvantage. He still gets a small bonus. But he is not beefy. He is not the kind of person who can take a lot of punishment. At least as much as some stockier fighters might be able to. He has a 12 intelligence. Not a bad mind. He's not stupid. But on the other hand, he's not suddenly going to crack open a book and break into commentary about a treatise that comes up. 12 wisdom. He's not stupid. He's not going to make a lot of foolish mistakes. He is not exceptionally wise, however, and still may make mistakes, and still may, end up taking some chances that a more cautious, wiser character might not. And a 15 charisma. Those good looks. They certainly pay off in the fact that he's not too bad at talking to people. So, we have really high physical statistics, not the greatest of health, but still not bad. There are no disadvantages anywhere in here. He's solid all throughout. So, what does this tell us? So, personality-wise, before I know anything else about his abilities, what other paths that might have been picked for him, I know that he's a little bit quicker than he is strong, but because he's got such high strength and high dexterity, he is clearly going to prefer physical solutions to problems. If he can't out-deft them with his dexterity, he doesn't have a problem with shouldering a load and pushing on through, whatever that means. If that means brute force climbing up a cliff wall, or if that means acrobatically, edging along a cliff ledge, he's good at both of those, and quite competent at any physical activity, or should be. Looking down a little bit further, we see that he does have, of course, as a fighter, he does have saving throws of Constitution and Strength that he's proficient, so that's good. They really don't pick out any skills here. They instead give you the ability to pick out 2 extra proficiencies between acrobatics, animal handling, athletics, history, insight, intimidation, perception, and survival. So, at this point I can start thinking about directions that this character might have taken. Also, his starting weapons are a short sword, a dagger, a short bow with 20 arrows. Yeah, that nice greatsword he's got on his back in the picture, he doesn't have one of those. So he instead has smaller, more finessey weapons, which fits to his strength. He is quicker than he is strong. He could do some pretty good stuff with a greatsword, but how is he armored? I'm guessing he probably only has leather armor. Yeah, leather armor. So he is not the kind of person who wants to go charging up. And yeah, number of hit points that he has to start off with, he has a healthy 16 hit points. Again, GUI Cube tends to inflate lower powered characters because they advance much slower. So, what do I know from this, and how can I use this to help me to roleplay the character? Before I read any of his background, I already looked at the statistics, and I have a pretty good feeling. This guy likes to solve his problems physically. He has no fear of any lack of grace. He's quite good there. He's got a tongue that can get him out of situations pretty deftly if that situation should occur. But as far as the thinking and things, well, he's not deficient. He clearly has his advantages in the physical fields. So, I already know that for the most part. He has dark vision, so darkness isn't a problem. That's good. He's not going to waste a lot of his gear with extra lanterns and oil, because he doesn't need to see in the dark that much. Fey ancestry, you have advantage on saving throws against being charmed. That's part of him being Fey blood touched. So, hey, good job, you. You can't be put to sleep through magical means. Very important for low-level fighters. And Infernal Legacy, the Thaumaturgy cantrip. Thaumaturgy is fun. Upon reaching 3rd level, you can cast Hellish Rebuke, and at 5th level, you can cast Darkness. So, pretty cool. Pretty solid. Okay, so now we kind of know the approach that the character is going to take. If I'm confronted with a situation, and I need to think, how would my character deal with it, or what's my best solution going to be? Almost always, I'm going to act. There's not much bonus to sitting around and thinking with this character. This is a man of action. He needs to be doing things to maximize his effectiveness. And quite honestly, that speaks to his tendencies too. Now, I'm going to look over the backstory that they give me to further sharpen the personality, and also to find out how I'm going to fit in to the actual story itself. So, Grenan Savre, that's his character's name, is Elnas's son. As a result, has received Fey blood touch. That's important in GUI Cube. I'm not going to bore you with details, but if you are well-versed in the GUI Cube world of Xayathay, you'll understand. That means he's going to have a kind of a hard life, even if he gets special powers for it. But he also has the blood touch of the Abyssal, and more than one of those is extremely rare. So rare that it doesn't even show up on his character stats. He's just under 6 feet tall, weighs 185 pounds, broad shoulders atop a lean frame that belies his strength. So he doesn't look like he's a muscular powerhouse. Most people who have a 17 strength in Dungeons & Dragons are pretty defined. They're not necessarily bodybuilder-esque, but they're usually pretty stout and stocky and, muscly. He looks a little less muscly. Due to his high dexterity, he could almost be confused as a rogue with his litheness, probably. Plus, his arsenal kind of speaks more towards being a rogue in his perspective. A bow, a short sword, a dagger, that's not what most people think of when they think fighter. And leather armor tops that all off. So yeah, you could be excused for thinking that Grenon here is actually a thief, but he's not. He has a deep sanguine complexion, black hair, bright red eyes. We see that from the picture. His features are strong yet kind. He has a small scar that runs down the side of his right cheek. Although his size does not fit the typical warrior look, his skill and power has taken many by surprise. Seems to be apt. Grenon trains with Kalnasse and Cray, the Blade. Those are characters in the Red Star Rising campaign for GUI Cube. He's skilled in both the longsword and short sword, and indeed uses both of them in melee combat. Too bad they didn't give him a longsword. It actually would be a bit of an upgrade for damage class. But quite honestly, as far as the numbers go, the short sword actually does as much damage, considering he gets an extra point of damage because it's a finesse weapon and he has a higher dexterity. It would do an extra point of damage and give him a bonus to hit over the longsword. So the rapier is probably the best weapon for him overall with class, but he could do quite competently with pretty much any weapon he touches, thanks to his high strength as well. So he's also very capable with the bow, clearly with that dexterity. Grenon also spars with the other player characters to improve his head-to-hand fighting skills. He's getting better. He still has a long way to go to match the young masters of the Blind Wind. Okay, those are monks. So he's not quite up to there. And he's been working with the great Clasby to improve his skill at gambling, in particular as card games. Well, that high charisma might certainly help him get into a certain number of games, despite his exotic appearance. After that, I would definitely have given him proficiency in gaming then. Which, again, I would have done that as part of his pre-build. Would have been to give him some skill at card games or dice games, but, you know, small hole. But he's been working on that. He likes card games. He has gained some skill and hopes one day to bring coin to the troop with his prowess. So, I know it is most of his pursuits are martial. He prefers to, use deft weapons. Fits his style. And, again, doesn't really mention that he's got the soul of a poet. He's a decent guy. But, again, most of his pursuits are emphasizing what he's already excellent at, which is what you generally find in most characters. What gets you to the point where you are surviving and thriving at the level that you're at and ready to break out into more. It's because you have certain strengths that have gotten you to that point. It's why, when you have, in general, the vast majority of characters for, say, Dungeons & Dragons, fit their prime requisite as the highest statistic. It guides your direction the way that your life goes. Sure, you'll have, say, a magic user who has an 11 intelligence but a 16 strength. People want to play against class sometime, and that's fine. But your average person is going to take their natural inclinations, aptitudes, and the things that they're talented in, and they're going to push that direction for how it shapes their life, their career, and helping to guide your character from just a number of stats to the way you have your outlook for your character and how you're going to play them true to the character. That all can tie in very much so. So, he's got a secret which really doesn't matter for the rest of the stuff. So that is basically the character as a whole. We've come up with a personality and a way of looking at the world through examining this character. And even though there are a few choices to make, we've used his gear, his looks, and his statistics to give the most informed opinion about what his personality is going to be like. And it turned out we pretty much nailed it in the overall story of his character and where he might fit into the world. He's not a frontline brawling tank. That's not really his thing. He's more finesse. He's more about, not necessarily exposing himself to a great deal of danger, but remaining highly effective in a fight. So that, I think, is a pretty decent explanation, really, of the approach that you might use when getting a character for the first time and trying to make something of it. Now you notice something too, and you're going to find this mostly with pre-generated characters, is that not every single detail of their personality is fixed, nailed down, to the point where it doesn't give you any wiggle room on how you're going to effectively play out that character. An example I can give you is from the last role-playing game that I ran, the Princess Bride role-playing game. The characters were all pre-generated, but the most that I gave them, besides the actual numbers that had their statistics, which were filled out, just a common character sheet, no picture, filled in with all of the details and skills, because that does take a little bit of time. But what I did for each of these characters is I gave them a paragraph or two of backstory that just explained where they came from, what they did. For instance, I'll just pick one of the characters at random. This was the Agent's Tale. If you've seen The Princess Bride, he would have been the role of Vicini in that. He works for somebody. He has a very specific role that he is there to do. And this is what I filled out for it. And this is, I think, pretty decent for pre-generated. You don't want to hand over a whole sheaf of papers that they have to read completely through to get the character. This puts things into play and should serve to color their characterization and drive their motivations. And after that, their personalities can be the one they pick. You operated under the auspices of a coalition of Italian counts and dukes in the name of Gilder, sowing discord when necessary and always watching and reporting. Sometimes something or someone needed to vanish, and you accomplished that, usually through the deeds of others. But good as you are, your run of luck ran out, and you were sold out by a cat's paw. That's somebody that you were using and manipulating, sold you out. You were sure you would be executed. You were surprised when you were given a meeting with the Count of Gilder and his chief of security, a deadly woman named Guvenre. You were told in no uncertain terms that your allegiance was now theirs utterly, or you would die. They compelled you in ways that need not be elaborated on, but you know they are fully prepared to carry out their threats if you displease them, and you fear them. See, I didn't have to go into too many details, just to know this is something you take very seriously. If the player chooses not to play that out, they're not doing a very good service to the character, but that should always be in the back of their minds that they're properly playing out their character. These notes are your ironclad guide on how to play out character, if you even get this in a pre-generated character. Sometimes you don't, but those are generally going to be games that are less narrative driven. Those are going to be games that are just going to put you in a scenario and see how you do. So, you were sent to Florin next, set up as a merchant of middling success. You keep odd hours, but report in the usual way to Gilder regularly. The actions of the king's son Humperdinck are growing alarming, and it seemed like the Duke was pleased to be getting your information in time. Yesterday, however, you received a puzzling message from your normal source from the Duke. It read, Guvenre is in Florin. She has stolen a great deal of gold. She must die. Arrange it or do it yourself. If she does not die, all that was promised will be carried out. You have few illusions of your chances against Guvenre in a fight. There must be a way. Through your information gathering, you determine she's operating under the cover of a raider who is on the northern coast of Florin. And that's the story that I had set up. If I go back to these characters and let them play them again, I will have to make another backstory that sets that event into play. But it would be interesting to do and bring all the characters together again. They were a fun bunch. Obviously, their life has changed a bit, but so that is kind of how I handle pre-generated characters, and by knowing that, by having the sheet in front of you, you're freed up from having to make choices. You could just get right into the game. By having the backstory, you're giving vital clues and motivations to your players so that they have a direction and a vector in which to go. It becomes less guesswork about, geez, what should we do here, if your character already knows certain information, knows which way to go. Is it railroading? A little bit, Because, let's be honest here, you're telling a story in a compressed amount of time often, especially at a convention where you only have about 4 hours of time or less. Maybe more, but usually it's about 4-hour blocks is how I handle it. And in that time, you want your people to get into a story, have a midpoint, crisis, finale, final confrontation possibly. That does take some time. And if you are excuse me, still getting over a cold. If you're wasteful of your time, you're not going to hit it, and you're going to have a bad ending where, well, we ran out of time. Sorry, folks. That's all we have. That's all we can do. So you have to drive action. You have to keep your players moving forward. That may involve a certain amount of railroading and a bit less choice for them, but that's kind of what you sign up for in a kind of a game that is predicated on a short amount of time. This character, for example, was set for about a 3 to 4 play session short story. Very much like a movie, if you would. So if you've ever seen the trope of an actor in a movie set going, what's my motivation? Right here. That's your motivation. That should get you forward so that then you can take what you're adding to the character and get the character on the right track to contribute to the story, have your cool moments, do cool things, and have an entertaining story that everybody will enjoy. Yes, there are going to be games that are more sandboxy where you can go about and do what you wish. But even then, there's going to be hooks and prods that'll try to get you going in the right direction. In a pre-generated character, if you come in completely cold, using these tips and tricks, being observant about the character, reading the subtext about what the world is like and the expectations for the story, can make it a lot more interesting for you and allow you to be a better player at the table. Once you feel comfortable with the character and can open up a little bit, who knows? You might find that group, even if they're a one-time only thing, might be a lot of fun and might bring you something new. So I highly encourage trying these kind of games out. And pre-generated characters are nothing to be afraid of. Some people may roll their eyes at them, but quite honestly, they're a useful way to explore different avenues of role-playing than you might be familiar with. And if you do find yourself with a familiar style of character pressed into your hands, maybe you'll take advantage of the opportunity to explore some new wrinkle that you've never done before, or try out a different kind of character, maybe affect a different voice, or pick out something in the character that you can make new and your own that might make you more memorable in that particular story for the people who will remember you from that time as that guy who did that thing, or that gal who really played that character well. So, just some thoughts, but hopefully they help. And this closes out another session here for Dungeon Tutor. So, thank you for joining me. I'm Rob, and until next session, roll some dice, play some games, have some fun, but stay safe. Thank you, and farewell.